Hi, it's Matt Kendall here. It's September I think 22nd, 2020. How's it at the end of September? I thought it was... Anyway, I'm speaking with Jules here today, where Jules and I worked together for, I think, like 3 or 4 sessions in total. And it was a few months ago now since our last session, isn't it? It's, when was it? Was this sort of like April, May kind of time that we did the
It
sessions?
was done by. It was definitely done by the end of April.
Yeah. Okay. So we're talking a good sort of 5 months now since. Um, Now, these interviews are just with clients to basically just give people a realistic sort of overview and sort of understanding about what IEMT is and how it works and how it can affect people's lives and the outcomes and the things you can achieve. Because I never offer any form of outcome. IEMT is an exploration of the actual problems rather than a solution, but helping people to guide them through these problems. They come up with their own solutions to their problems. So, Jules, good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you.
Now, it's been a while. We've been trying to book this in for a while, but it seems that you go on more holidays than Judith Chalmers and stuff. You're always abroad, so it's taken a little while uh, just to do this for a while. So I said we did about, I think it was like 3 or 4 sessions in total, wasn't it, over a couple of months.
Yeah.
And so before we get into it, how was it that you first heard of me and IEMT?
I was diagnosed with complex PTSD about 5 years ago, resulting from a really difficult family court case that went on over years. And the biological father of my two boys, is a convicted paedophile, and there was a lot of trauma and things that happened during that. And so I've always been on the lookout. I've had lots of therapy over the years, and I've always been on the lookout for things that can help with PTSD. And I saw some of your posts on Facebook about some of the work that you were doing. And at that point, I was looking at EMDR and eye movement type approaches. And so I kind of registered it, but it took me a good couple of years before I made contact with you because um, at that point, I found it incredibly difficult to even think about, let alone talk about everything that I've been through. My PTSD symptoms were very easily triggered by talking about it. So it's quite difficult to make the decision, which is why it took me so long.
Hmm. So now, because we used to live in a similar area, and because I used to post on a local group, and I was looking for people just to do some demos with, and I think
Yeah.
it was a girl called Jodie who I haven't seen. Well, no, sorry, not that long ago. But she came to see me just where I used to live, and we did a demo. If people are watching, you can see that demo in the demo section on YouTube or whatever it is you're watching this on. And it's me working with quite a young blonde girl, I can't remember. And she just sat on the sofa and I sort of demonstrated IEMT. So you got married, and just to make it clear to people, you got married to this man, and then it was after you were married you found out about these previous not even allegations, it was crimes, wasn't it, they'd actually
Yeah, it
committed.
was after it was when I was pregnant with our second child.
Mm.
I was contacted by somebody, which set off a big police and social services type thing. It turned out that he was using a second identity.
Oh wow.
There'd been an adoption at some point in his life, so he was able to use a different identity, and there
Okay.
was a huge fraud thing. He had convictions, and he wasn't. Yeah, it was a huge situation over years with
Mm.
police, social services, various investigations. The children weren't able to see him, but he was able to take me to the family court for contact, even though I was not allowed by the social services and the police to enable that contact. So it was very horrible, sort of 7 years of court
Mm.
cases and police investigations that we went through.
And so because I know that you're on what was the TV program as well, the
Dispatches.
Dispatches, yeah. So I actually saw the clip that you were talking about, and because he had all of his cases funded and you had to privately fund everything. And
Amazingly, there's public funding for convicted paedophiles who want contact with their children. Who knew?
Wow.
But there isn't a victim. So yeah, so I had to self-fund. So
That's
there was a lot.
that seems a bit wrong.
Yeah,
If
it is
it's
wrong. It
yeah.
is wrong, and that's why I made the dispatchers program. And actually, we're doing a lot of work now with the judiciary, and with the Domestic Abuse Commissioner's Office and the Victims Commissioner's Office
Mhm.
on all of this stuff. And I was just at a big meeting at the House of Commons 2 days ago, and there's lots of stuff
Wow,
happening and changing.
good.
Um, but yeah,
So you obviously all this was going on. You went to your GP and he diagnosed you. Was it your GP who diagnosed you,
no,
or
no,
no,
it
no?
wasn't. It was a forensic psychiatrist. So
Right.
actually, as part of the court case, one of the things that my ex was alleging against me was that the reason that the children didn't want to see him was that I was alienating him from the children, that I had mental health problems and a severe anxiety disorder that made me paranoid about his convictions. And I
Mm,
actually had to go for a full psychiatric assessment with a forensic psychiatrist. And actually, the psychiatrist found that I didn't have any mental health problems or an anxiety disorder, but I did have complex PTSD as a result of what I'd been through.
mm,
And so it was from that, and she recommended a course of antidepressants and various therapies, all of which I had tried. And I'd been on antidepressants for a number of years when I met you. But I was still having the PTSD I was still getting triggered and having these really horrendous panic attacks where, and I wasn't really in control of what might trigger it. And it would abate for a period of time and come back, but it was still a very regular part of my life, and I kind of had to manage those symptoms all the time.
okay. So it was a couple of years after all of this kind of went on, and so for 2 years you were managing your PTSD symptoms. You were on antidepressants, but you were still getting flashbacks, and you were very triggering, and there's
Yeah.
lots of stuff kind of going on. Okay, so you had all these things going on. You saw I made a post a couple of years prior. You then contacted me. Um, did you know much about IEMT beforehand? You just
No.
decided to.
No, so I did know that I did understand the principle that by stimulating the outer corners of the eye in a certain way, you could kind of access memories held in a certain way in the brain and kind of reprocess them. That
Hmm.
was I understood that, but I'd never met anybody who'd had it.
So you decided to sort of just, give anything a go. So now you'd already had been in a.
The thing that appealed to me about IEMT was that I wouldn't have to talk in detail about the past experiences, because at that point I was again trying talking therapy and
Mm,
psychotherapy, and I kept coming up against these blocks because it was so traumatizing for me to go back over some of the incidents that were the
mm,
most upsetting to me, that we weren't able to make progress. And if I was able to actually go into it in the session, I kind of couldn't function the next day. So I was really at a loss, because talking therapy wasn't, I think, like a lot of people with PTSD and complex PTSD, talking therapy can be really hard. And I know it's something that therapists, I'd had several therapists say that to me, that, they wish that they had a way of helping me to get over this hurdle of having to talk about it in order to process it. It just seemed like I was locked in this, um, locked in this cycle where
yeah.
I couldn't get to the processing because it would re-trigger me, and I'd have to deal with the immediacy of an anxiety attack and flashbacks, and then I couldn't do the processing. So that's what attracted me to IEMT rather than, say, EMDR. It was the fact that I wouldn't have to talk about. I mean, and you know how difficult it was for me even to make, mention in note form what some of the incidents were in
Yeah.
the session.
And now you can talk about it quite freely.
Well, I just spoke at the House of Commons about it. I mean,
Yeah.
I talk about it all the time because, part of the healing bit for me that I wasn't able to get
Mm,
to is, actually I did win my court case, and I've made a dispatches program, and I've done a lot of mentoring of other women leaving domestic abuse situations, and being able to do that work is very healing for me,
mm,
and re-empowering. But that was, that's not something that I could have done before.
mm.
That was blocked to me because I couldn't think about it.
Okay. So you had all these problems going on. You had all these flashbacks. You're getting very triggered, even writing about the things triggering you. You'd had multiple different forms of therapy, but all of those had failed because you couldn't get to the part where you could work on the stuff because it was too triggering to get to it. So therefore, you're locked in that cycle.
I
You
wouldn't
want to.
say that therapy failed because I think it got me through.
Oh no, yeah,
But
it's
it didn't, it didn't, and no one was suggesting to me that you can
no.
cure
Mm,
PTSD, but it didn't stop just the sort of.
okay.
I don't want to say it failed.
No, no, I actually, yeah, failed was the wrong word. What it means is that you couldn't get to where you wanted to be
No,
by using traditional therapy methods. I think scans a bit better, doesn't it?
yeah,
So you tried different methods. You'd seen me on Facebook. You contacted me. So let's sort of take it from there. So, like I say, you'd had different forms of therapy. You've been to your GP. You're on antidepressants. You're dealing with all this stuff kind of going on. You weren't even able to talk about the things or even write about them without becoming overwhelmed, and then that would then knock you out for a couple of days. To where you are now, standing in the House of Commons, talking about this is quite a big journey or quite a big shift. So let's go back to your first session. You'd never met me before. I think we'd had a chat, like a
yeah.
pre-chat. What was your experience like of having IEMT in your own words?
So I found the first session very difficult. I mean, I was terrified the day before, the night before. I was terrified because it was so hard for me to,
Mm,
just the fact of going back into it and having to remember, there were some very specific terrifying memories that happened to
mm,
me. That it was a very abusive dynamic, and my kids were kidnapped at one point. There was violence and scary moments, as well as just the sort of trauma of the court process. And I knew I'd have to focus in on these things that I would really be managing by burying them down and then dealing with them when they popped up. So I found
mm.
it very terrifying. I was in quite a state at the beginning of the session. And I remember that you said to me, "You're only going to have to do this once and it's never going to feel as bad again." And I couldn't really imagine that. And then we did a trial memory, where I thought of something we started with a memory that wasn't like my most traumatic memory. And we worked on it. And it did kind of became irrelevant whether I bought into it. And I didn't know if it was going to work or not. I really wanted it to.
Mm.
But as I was in the session, I could feel the memory changing. Actually can't even remember the memories that we went through, which is crazy because they were like so significant to me at the time. But I could feel them changing, and they changed in lots of different ways. So, having never heard from anybody who had IEMT before, I didn't really know what to expect. And actually, I hadn't watched your video at that point. I'd just seen your Facebook post asking for
Right.
participants, and then we'd exchanged emails. So I really did go in a bit blind.
Mm.
Um, but like in terms of what would happen in my brain. But what happened for me was, I think the first couple of memories that we worked on, they kind of went from being these very vivid, sensory almost experiences where they were I remember you saying to me, are these like videos or are they static images? And I'd never thought question my memories in that way, but they were
Mm.
like videos, but they were so intense and vivid and real. Um, and they very quickly, as we were doing the eye movements, started to sort of disintegrate a bit and became kind of like patchy static images, that were almost like kind of cartoon like. Not quite cartoony, but it was like they weren't real. They
Yeah.
didn't feel or appear real to me. Not that they didn't happen, but there was no sound, there was no emotion and feeling. And I felt that as it was happening. And then um, I had this, initially, I had this very weird disconnect where there would be all this emotion because I started the session very emotional, but it wasn't, but the emotion was there, but it wasn't connected to these memories. And then kind of my body was able to deal with the emotions, sort of the emotional effect stopped. So the first session was huge for me because we actually got through. I had a list of like 50 memories that I thought I was going to have to work through. And we did like four. And I was looking at the list and I couldn't remember why these certain ones, what was it, or what,
Mm.
it was like a very quick um, change, which is difficult to trust. And but I did. I did after the session feel quite dizzy and headachy. I remember you saying to me, "Look, your brain has been doing work.
Mm.
You know that can happen. It's normal." Um, I rested, and then I kind of went back to those memories, you know, and the whole situation a bit over those next few days, and
Mm.
it kept sort of changing. But what happened and where it stuck, the initial kind of cartoony or sort of disintegrating or going from video to static thing stopped. Now it's just I can access these memories as fact. I can talk about them, but I can't. It doesn't feel that I went through them in the sense that I don't feel the emotion that I felt at the time.
Mhm.
So, you know, I know all these things happen to me, and I'm very upset that they happen to me and the kids. But I have kind of like almost like a more rational thing, like factually, this is what happened to me. But emotionally, it doesn't have a pull on me. I suppose that's the way to describe it.
Mm.
Um, I needed further sessions. So because it was complex PTSD, it actually took me a long time to it took my brain a long time to work out what were the things that I was hanging on to. So the initial obvious ones, like finding out my ex was a paedophile, like violent moments or
Mm.
properly, you know, scary moments, were obvious. But then when those were dealt with over time, just you know, other things kind of popped up that that I hadn't actually consciously thought of, um, ever maybe, that were that were bothering me. And we did some further sessions, and it was really after those further sessions when I dealt with memories that weren't necessarily in what I thought were causing me problems, but
Mm.
popped up later, that I sort of actually felt really the full weight lift. I mean, I haven't had a panic attack or an anxiety attack. I have had moments of being really upset.
Mhm.
You know, I'm still working in this world of domestic abuse and paedophiles having access to children. Like it's
Yeah.
not. And but you know, I think you can see how I'm able to talk about it rationally and reasonably, not like somebody who's been diagnosed with complex PTSD. I don't think I would have that diagnosis again now. I
No.
did continue with the psychotherapy, and I was able to talk. Um, about things and kind of do some of that processing that I hadn't been able to do. But what was really weird was that both my therapists, and you spoke to my therapist, both my therapists and I found that over time there just wasn't as much processing to do. And you know, obviously I've done a huge amount of work on everything that I've been through and tried to process it and made the documentary and everything. But
Mm.
um, I do think that the anxiety and the trauma it wasn't something that I could have overcome through talking therapy and consciously, if that's the right word. It was things that were locked kind of, I don't know if I'm using the right lingo, but in my subconscious, and I just wasn't able to access them. And you know, like I said, I personally wasn't really able to access the stuff that was really at the root of it until I'd got through these things that were constantly triggering me, which was like fear of harm, fear of
Mm.
there were moments when my ex had really beaten down a door to get to me with tools. Like those memories were almost on the surface. That I was like,
Mm.
behind that was other stuff because there was a lot of stuff. And I think we did have 4 sessions, but after the second session, I really felt the change overall emotionally. So you can feel the change in your head and you try and access those memories, they're not quite there, but there's kind of like this emotional, for me anyway, bit that was left, but it didn't have anywhere to kind of attach to. And so over time I was able to kind of process it out. That's my experience.
Mm. Wow. So there's an awful lot to sort of break down there. And when you're saying back going to these other memories, because the way that IEMT works, when somebody comes to me like yourself, you'll have been through these horrible things. We can focus in on those things. Then we can look at the underpinning memories and what we call the imprints. So the emotions that you're experiencing now, they then link back to memories. And we were going quite far back into your
I
childhood
mean,
and
what
stuff.
yeah, I mean, like, what I mean and look, I've had a really happy childhood and lovely
Mm.
family and all the rest of it. You know, it never quite made sense anyway to me, not that I particularly thought about it so much,
Mm.
you know, why obviously I'd been through an awful experience, and it's normal to have some kind of trauma, but it
Mm.
really had such a huge emotional impact on me and changed me so much. And well, I suppose I hadn't fully really questioned that, to be honest. But when I dealt with those obvious memory
Mm.
issues, my own mind, it wasn't a choice. My brain started bringing up these things that I'd never thought about ever, which weren't big things, but
No.
they were memories that for whatever reason I had obviously held on to without my knowledge because I hadn't had them before.
Yeah.
And they popped up. And so we looked at them, and even though they weren't a big deal and they were quite quick to go over, they kind of released something further. And I guess the way that I've understood this from your explanation and my psychotherapist is,
Mm.
that I was clinging on to these things subconsciously, and they maybe would never have had any impact on noticeable impact if I hadn't gone through something that just happened to kind of pick up on an already weak area there, a bit of, that attached to a bit of
Mm.
anxiety. So that's how I understand that. The other thing the other thing that's happened is a lot of other memories have come back. And that's what I would say has happened in the month since I've seen you, is I I didn't realize that I had been suppressing memories of, my kids in their early years. I didn't have all of these memories have come back to me of, nice memories,
Mm.
things that just weren't in my head, like, because I think they were so wrapped up in being with my ex and, other stuff that went on. I'd lost them, and clearing those things away, I've got back a lot.
Mm.
I have a different view of what went on in those years. I think a more balanced view, because there were also really lovely times, like there also are when you have children. And
Mm.
honestly, I didn't have those memories. I'd forgotten a lot. Um, that's been a development since, which is really unexpected. Um, Quite soon after the sessions, people would people would say to people who didn't know that I'd had IMT or done anything, would say stuff to me like, "Oh, you hug differently. Like you really like lean into a hug now." My mum, who I hadn't had much physical affection with for years, which I always thought was her, I didn't even notice. And one day she said to me, "You're hugging me and kissing me again." And I think that some of that was, you know, when you're dealing with PTSD, and it's so, and people who don't have PTSD might not understand this, but it's when it happens, it's such an overwhelming feeling, like you're
Yeah.
feels like you're dying and under attack. um, it does create this kind of, I suppose, generalized anxiety, and you hold yourself back. I think I was holding myself back from people, and it was completely unconscious.
Mm.
And it was completely unconscious as well that changed, but it did change and it stayed like that. I mean, I have a much better relationship with my mother, and I didn't even know that I needed to, or that there was anything there,
Mm.
or that it was anything to do with this.
Well, when you go through something as large as what you did, it becomes your world.
Yeah,
And then trying to fix it and stuff becomes your world. And
yeah.
people get very self-involved, and not through a narcissistic way, but because there's got so much going on, you're trying to work it out, is that you miss a lot of other stuff kind of going on around you,
I think
you
that's
know.
complete. I think that's so correct and true. I honestly think I'm a much better parent, a much better friend, a much better girlfriend, a much better daughter since I did the IEMT. And I wouldn't have said that I was selfish or whatever before, but I was
Mm.
needy because, I was not emotionally. When I look back, I was not emotionally stable. I was functioning. I,
Mm.
I did great. I coped and got on with life, but I
Yeah.
was having to manage a lot. And of course, it makes you very like inward looking. So yeah, that might be part of it as well. But I think it's also that feeling of just feeling safer. I
Mm.
felt irrationally scared a lot of the time because of that feeling of your whole world could change and you have no control over it. I have a different perspective on what happened to me because I'm able to turn over those events and those memories, I guess, in a way that I wasn't before.
Absolutely. And when you look at things from a different perspective, the actual things change. When you change the way you look at something, the thing you look at changes, is the old adage, isn't it? And I think because of the things you sort of been through, and we're just saying about getting your memories back, what I found is that negative memories and experiences can often act like a capstone of a volcano. And when you remove, or when that's sort of disintegrated or moved aside, all these other memories and experiences can begin to sort of come through. And you're not forcing it, it's just like a natural process. Because we remember negative memories more strongly than positive ones, because they're the ones that keep you alive and keep you safe. But the thing is, you weren't in that situation anymore. So they weren't, in a self-help way, serving you anymore. So what we did, we looked at all these threats of danger, and we made sure it was going to be safe for you to, sort of work on these different memories. But you went, I can remember, in the first session, you were, I think you were even typing me some labels and stuff and just saying, rather than actually saying what the word was.
I
And
could
you was,
barely say, you know, there was
yeah,
times when I was, like, saying bathroom, and, you know, that
yeah,
was the scene when my ex-partner had tried to kill me, and
mm,
couldn't I couldn't. I'm like, I couldn't
yeah,
talk about it, and I didn't need to, and even saying that and going over it, I was like, as I said, you know, it was very difficult at the time. I could not have had a conversation like this.
no,
I was pouring with tears, not saying anything, you know, just thinking about these things. It was so painful, but then that pain very quickly just kind of dissipated, like the
mm,
emotion just kind of drains away, and you're kind of like, "Why am I crying?" I mean, some of the memories, you know, kind of went almost like a jokey element to them, which
mm,
sounds bizarre and weird, and it didn't kind of stay like that, but that was my initial reaction, like, I'd think of them and feel this urge to giggle. Like, it was really unexpected how you know, going into this thinking, like, that I wouldn't feel anything, and that maybe a bit late, you know, I didn't know how it worked. I didn't know if like a few days later I'll try and access the memory and it would I didn't
mm,
know it would be this instant thing. And that's what made me able to continue. I mean, I found like the first 20 minutes of the first session that we did like very emotionally painful, like the same as any therapy session that I tried before.
mm,
And then from that moment on, there was no emotional pain. And I was excited for the second session. I was excited,
mm,
if you remember, because I just wanted more of it gone.
mm,
You
mm,
know, I experienced that. I slept like for 3 days and I didn't have bad dreams and I didn't wake up with anxiety. And it was unbelievable. It was so weird and liberating and and kind of crazy. I didn't know if it was just a kind of quick fix and what was going to happen. And I was excited to go to the second session. I remember that, and I found the second session like almost fun because I felt so
mm,
empowered over my PTSD and these horrible memories. I'm like, well, I can work you out. I can
mm.
get you out, and that was it. That was amazing. And
And
I
we're not
really,
fighting it. We're not fighting the memories. We're just helping them to let go, basically,
yeah,
by processing them. So it's not like with a lot of people, with a lot of sort of NLP and hypnosis and stuff like you're trying to boost people up and all that kind of stuff. With IEMT, we look at the problem, we look at it, we take it apart. Oh, so it's not a problem anymore. That's all. Then you don't need to fight the thing.
mm. Yeah. Um, so I ended up. So I did continue because I did feel. I found the IEMT had such a huge impact on me, but also um, it was a lot. You know, my in my particular situation, there was just a lot, and
Mm,
um, I wanted to make sure that I had kind of done all the work that I could.
yeah.
So I did. I had a couple of further sessions with you. I do think by the last session, I didn't necessarily need it, but it was like kind of almost that reassuring thing of, and I think you were saying to me that I didn't need it, but I wanted to. I couldn't. Part of it was just not being able to believe that it was going to stay like that. And
Mm,
you kept saying to me, "Well, keep access. You know, you can keep trying to access the memory. It's not. You know, it's not going to hurt you, and see how you feel. And if something pops up, we can work on it." You know, and I did, and look, you can see. I mean, it's several months later.
yeah.
You know, I would never ever have been able to speak like this. I don't even feel emotional. I mean, I feel very grateful to you, but I don't feel emotional or particularly sad. It's part of my life story. I did go through these things, they were horrible, but they haven't got that power to hurt me because they're over. And I think the thing about PTSD is you don't have a feeling of it being over, and that's what stopped me from being able to move on. It really feels like it's in the past and it's over. I don't know if people with PTSD will understand when I say that, but it is absolutely over. So I don't have those feelings of being triggered and feeling under attack or feeling anxiety. I haven't had nightmares or bad dreams. I haven't had many dreams about it. And I used to dream about him and that all the time, at least once a week. So yeah, the memories have shifted. There's a particular kind of what I associate with the IEMT work, which is this particular kind of tingly headache that you get in your head here. That was my experience, which is weird because I've never had that experience of my brain doing work that
Yeah.
But that almost was also reassuring because I knew that something was happening.
Mhm.
And I'd never felt that feeling before. I don't know exactly what that is. I guess it's just, I don't know, blood going
Well,
through.
I believe it's just the brain working in a different way to normal. Because usually when you think about something, you just think about it. When we're moving the eyes and you're thinking about it, it's actually doing stuff. It's changing the internal representations. So I spoke with a neuroscientist about this, and basically she said it's just like the brain's internal communication. It's being lit up and used in a different way. So it's like when you go ice skating, you find muscles you never knew you had, So
Yeah.
it's just basically that. So it's not dangerous, and it's not a headache in sort of a stress headache. It's literally sort of the brain working. People often say sometimes at the back of the head or sometimes in their frontal lobes, it'll get a bit tingly.
Mm.
And it's because the brain uses a lot of energy, It's the most energy intensive organ that we have. And it's just really focusing. And it's like when you really work hard and focus on something, you can hurt your head. You have to have a break after a
Well,
while.
it definitely felt a little bit like that. Not it wasn't a pain headache. It's a, I have to explain it.
Yeah.
A tingly feeling. It's an
Yeah.
unusual. But what's really interesting is that I would have my IEMT session, like from when I used to do the therapy and have to take like a day off work the following day, plan for people to be around to take the kids because I would come out of the therapy, we'd have to end the therapy session with 15 minutes so that I could calm down and blah, blah, blah.
Wow.
IEMT, I'd like have the IEMT session go over far more than I never got to this stuff, never. And then carry on my day and feel like good. And that's also a huge difference from typical talking therapy. It's like the if you have the IEMT that day, it's like, oh, it's going to be a good day afterwards. It's a very different way of thinking about a therapy experience.
Yeah. And you just said there before as well, like after the first session, you're excited for the second session.
Yeah.
And most people in therapy are not usually excited about going for therapy because often you're going there, to basically often get re-traumatized a lot of the time, just talking about the negative stuff without really creating much change work a lot of the time, just talking about it real. And again, like you said, you'd have to take the rest of the day and the next day off to deal with what's coming up, but not necessarily anything changing. It just brings the stuff up. With IMT, right, well, what's the problem? Let's work on these issues. And then your brain will take a few days. And that's why we take a week apart between the sessions. And it'll just start to sort of reprocess all of these underpinning memories, all of these things. And it allows you to see things from where you are today. And it makes you much more present. And the whole point of IMT is it brings you to the present time. So it's a lot of people with PTSD are living in the past because this stuff's kind of going on and fearing the future about what might happen as a result of these past things. So we're thinking about how to be safe in the future. We're thinking about all these problems in the past, and we just miss the present. And so with IEMT, it just brings you to the here and now. And it just makes things a lot calmer, a lot clearer. And you can then actually make decisions based on what's in front of you rather than your, experiences in the past. So it's been like, what, 5 months since the sessions. So we did 4 sessions over about 6 weeks, I think, something like that. Because we always do the first 2 a week apart. And then basically, I leave it up to the client if they want to book another 1 or 2 in, whatever it might be. So that's what we did, wasn't it? It was over about a month, maybe. So how has it been since your final session about 4 or 5 months ago? What's your life been like? What's your sort of health and sleep and everything like that been like? And what have you been able to do that you weren't able to do before?
So when we met, I was the way that I was managing my symptoms was with antidepressants and cannabis. I was smoking a lot just to manage anxiety, um, and my sleep wasn't great. I mean, I mean, just say, I've got 3 kids and a business. I was
Mm.
functioning, but I found my life really hard. Um, I found it really hard to be happy, and I wasn't calm really ever. And I was dealing a lot in the mornings with anxiety. And I really wanted to get off the antidepressants, but I was very scared of what the anxiety level would be
Yeah.
without them. So I came off the antidepressants. I mean, I was weaning, or I was trying to wean off when I met you. I weaned off. I'm trying to think how long it's been. I think it's been 3 months ago. Um, so, and I'm smoking so much less, so much less. Um, I know you think that I shouldn't smoke at all, but um, but
Mm.
but anyway, so that's been really big, and the reason is because I've not been feeling the need, not because I've necessarily been made a decision that I'm going to. I just
Mm.
haven't felt that need in the same way. Um, my sleep is really good. I haven't had any issues sleeping at all in those 5 months. So that stayed even when we went on holiday, even after being, at the House of Commons talking about domestic abuse, even after meetings, because I'm mentoring women going through the courts. It hasn't impacted me in the way that it would have done in the past. I've been able to do it. Um, it's not like this kind of silver bullet and everything is magically amazing in my life. Obviously, I still went through those experiences. There are still some, things that I sometimes have to deal with. All I
Mm.
can say is it's like I don't have PTSD anymore. I don't have those symptoms. I don't have flashbacks. I don't have anxiety. I don't have uncontrollable emotional responses to things. I'm still an emotional person, but I feel like I've got my sense of self back. And the bit you said about being in the present, I think that's it. I'm really able to. I am able to enjoy my life a lot more. I am enjoying my life, and it really has been. I'm not saying that I've had a bad life, but it's been really difficult to enjoy my life carrying the weight of all of that trauma and fear along with me. Not having that anymore frees me up to think, well, I've got 3 amazing kids. I got through that court case. There were loads of things wrong with what happened to me. I want to campaign to change it. And that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm doing loads of work um, in my spare time, with other women going through the courts, with paedophile exes and stuff like that. And that really means a lot to me. It means a huge amount for me to be able to do that stuff, to be able to do something productive that can change the system rather than constantly trying to manage my own psychological well-being so that I can function in my life. It is a big change. Um, I would say initially I had a couple of months of almost like euphoria because I felt so light to be free from, once I realized that it had been 4, 5, 6 days with no anxiety, 7 days, it's been 2 weeks, you know, it gets exciting because you feel liberated and free. Like you get used to living in a certain way and managing yourself in that way. Um, and so I was kind of really euphoric. Um, and that's why we've had a lot of holidays. um,
Mm.
and and that kind of faded, and I'm more used to it now. I don't expect to wake with a panic attack, and therefore I'm not particularly
Mm.
grateful that it's not there. I'm just like it's normal. So that kind of initial euphoria went, um, and I realised I wasn't going to feel like joyfully light for every day for the rest of my life.
Mm.
Just normal, and I'm really good with that. Just feel normal. Just feel that I can be honest and authentic. If people ask me, about my family situation, I can say that my kids had, have a different biological dad, and this is their stepdad, and there's nothing there. It's a fact. Just little things like that, which
Mm.
weren't available to me, to just be normal and authentic. I have plunged into doing this work with the family courts and with other women, um, survivors. because I always really wanted to do that. And that's a different part of my, healing journey, or what I
Yeah.
need to really, it's really important to do
Yeah.
that. And I'm really grateful that I'm able to. I wasn't able to before. It would take such a huge, I remember I went to a dinner with um, a group of really senior judges to discuss changes that needed to be made with the family courts. Like, what an amazing experience, and the dinner itself was absolutely fantastic. The entire day and night before, I was a complete emotional mess, unable to function. And the entire day and night afterwards, I was a complete emotional mess, unable to function. So I could do these things, but the cost to me was massive. Whereas now I go and do these things and I could just carry on with my day, carry on with my life. So yeah, I trust it now, that it's not just a gimmick and gonna, or a sticking plaster and it's all gonna pop up out again. Because
Mm.
I've prodded and poked so much, with choosing to do this campaigning and this mentoring. I mean, I've sat in a room with people watching me on the dispatches program talking about it. And I know that when I did that dispatches program, I was ill for 2 weeks. It 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 really was so difficult for me to do the dispatches interview.
Mm.
Whereas, and I couldn't, when I watched it the first time, I had all of my friends and family with me and I could barely cope. And now I can watch it and I think, yeah, I bloody went through that and it was wrong and it was a horrible experience and I'm going to do something about it. And I love that. It's so different from how I felt before.
Well, um, do I have any more questions? I don't know. I think you've answered everything that I can possibly think of. So, let me ask you, like, sort of like one kind of final question, really. Did you ever think you would get to where you are now, going back like a year or whatever it might be, when you were really having all your PTSD symptoms? You were obviously smoking a lot, you were on antidepressants. Did you ever think you'd get to where you are now? Did you think that'd be possible?
No, I thought that what I had ahead of me was really, really intensive therapy that I'd maybe have to take a couple of years out of work for, to give myself a chance to recover. And
Mm.
I hoped that at some point I'd feel strong enough to do that. And I thought that was the only way out. I would never
No.
have imagined myself. I was saying this to my family the other day. I would never have imagined myself, at a meeting with judges at the Old Bailey in the House of Commons talking about these things, like not as a victim survivor, but as an expert on this system, because I've experienced it so much and done so much mentoring on it. I would never, feeling competent and capable again. No, I would never, ever have imagined that.
So, for all those listening, if you're going through complex PTSD, now again, I can never offer an outcome. I can offer an exploration of the problem. And like you're saying, you're still healing and you will be probably forever in some
Yeah,
senses.
the experience
That's,
still happened to me. It
yeah,
hasn't, it can't erase it. It did not happen.
no.
It's just that particular anxiety, emotional
Mm.
power of those memories has gone.
Yeah. And so we can't change what happened, or we can change how it affects you today. So I'm sure there's a lot of people in your position who are searching, they're online now looking for help with PTSD, complex PTSD, who may have never even heard of any kind of eye movement therapy, or they're a bit wary because they don't want to go for 3 months of EMDR or 2 years of therapy. So for those people who are watching, for somebody who came into this sort of quite skeptical, which is good to have a healthy skepticism about it, what do you have to say to those people who are watching, who are in pain, who are maybe considering having IEMT?
Look, I wish I'd done it sooner. I delayed it by 2 years from fear and not understanding the process. And I had another, so I lost another 2 years to the PTSD, I suppose. When I look back, I wish that I had done it sooner. I have sent several of my friends to you, Matt, since, who've had similar really good experiences. One of my friends was really in a terribly dark place, and she's now in a really, really, really good place. And um, I do urge people that I come across to do the IEMT. It really works. It's really changed my life. I'm really, 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 really grateful that I heard about it and was able to access it. It's a completely different situation. I'm like it's difficult to explain it when you haven't experienced it because it sounds like all kind of magical. When you actually do
Yeah.
it, it feels quite scientific and kind of very familiar to anybody who's done any hypnotherapy or other kind of psychiatric approaches like that. Like there's nothing weird and magical about it at all when you're in it. It's quite sciencey, but
Mm.
um, because it's just not that well known. I would say just do it. It's so much cheaper and quicker anyway than any kind of therapy that you may as well. But it's been such an amazing experience to me. I think you know how grateful I am to you, Matt. It's been totally life changing. I'm sure you can see that for my family as well. My kids not having to, you know, to s- to grow up with me still having that sort of anxiety
Mm.
and emotional response to stuff, it's a big deal. It is a really, really big deal. And of course, I would really urge anybody. I think it's particularly good for trauma and PTSD
Yeah.
in the way that some things, the reason why EMDR, EMDR again, you do need to talk through the trauma. So for people like me, where it's a really difficult topic and set of experiences that can be difficult. The fact that you don't have to talk about, I never really told you the detail of what I went through until I was able to. I didn't have to go,
Mm.
didn't have to re-traumatize myself and
Yeah.
re-trigger myself. You didn't need to know. I just needed to be able to focus in on the memories.
Hmm.
That in itself is just an absolute gift to anybody with PTSD. So I really hope that more people take up IEMT and that it spreads because it's life changing.
And I think, thank you, first of all, thank you. But what I really love is the ripple effect. So not only is it affecting you, that will then affect your relationship with your friends. You even said there's a better relationship with your mother, with your kids. And because you're doing this court work now, which you may have not been able to do previously or as effectively, how many people that's going to affect and their lives and their friends. And so this is why I don't do much client work. I do mainly sort of training. So I can train people to do stuff like this. So I can affect thousands and thousands and thousands of people with that ripple effect kind of going out. Because when somebody's going through PTSD, it affects the whole family. It affects, it's like having somebody who has some sort of illness or an addiction or something, it affects not just you, but other people as well. And when you are well, and functioning, it just, people can just begin to relax. So,
But I think
and
you can forget when you have PTSD, you can forget what it's like, feels like to be normal.
yeah,
You can forget. I had forgotten. You get used to it. You think that
yeah.
you have to manage yourself in this way forever, and this is how you are now. I remember thinking that, um, and it's not.
So what's now? So you've had a summer holiday like no other. You're doing your court work. How are you sort of taking this forward now?
We were
What's
celebrating.
yeah.
So the court work's ongoing. I've got loads of stuff that I'm working on, which is really exciting. Working on my business, the kids. Um, I don't know. I'm just going to continue to enjoy my life now and focus on the rest of my life.
And if people are going through what you went through, do they contact you directly? Do you get put in contact with them? How does it work?
Oh yeah, they can contact me directly, but I'm often referred people from other charities or lawyers.
Okay.
Um, and but yeah, people are very welcome to contact me. I'm really happy to help people going through what I went through. Bloody horrible.
And do you have a website or a social media presence at all, which is best or?
I mean, I'm on Facebook. Um, I'm on Facebook and my page is public, and I'm on Instagram, Jules Margo, Julia Margo.
Well, that's let me see how long. Well, that took a lot longer than I was thinking.
Sorry.
No. It's the thing is when people are really interested in something, they will listen to it all because I think it's very inspiring to hear people's stories from where you came from to where you are now is a massive, massive journey, and only in a relatively short period of time. as well. Like I say, we only had yeah, it's 4 sessions, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So,
But it's funny because I was saying to my dad's a psychiatrist, and I was saying to him, you know, well, what if it's psychosomatic? Like, how do I
mm,
know it's really working? And he said to me, does it matter? It's worked. Why are you questioning it? It was like, the
yeah,
point is you're working with your brain, and something
mm,
that's psychosomatic from a psychiatric perspective is a powerful brain change anyway.
yeah.
Um, but obviously psychiatrists are well into it. I mean, he's and I think my parents have even referred people to you, I think,
Yes, yeah.
because when they've found patients that are unable to speak about the issue they need to get to because they're too traumatized, having seen how effective it is, they've been referring people to help them get over it. I just honestly, it's an amazing thing that you're doing. It's amazing.
Well, this is why I do interviews like this, because I'm trying to get more people involved, trying to get more people on the trainings. So, guys, for just for people listening or watching, I do usually a training every month. You can find it at IEMT Practitioner Training or IEMT Academy. I'm also all over the internet. Just Google Matt Kendall, you'll find me everywhere. And I do train. So everything we do, because we've got to mention as well, our sessions are completely online as well.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
so I said, although we are obviously quite in close proximity, I do everything online now. So I teach people how to do this mainly online because people are worried about the effectiveness of therapy online. And I was like, well, I'll show you. And look, we have a result right here. So I usually train, I say usually once a month, and I usually train between 10 and 14 people. And we have a range of people who are ex-clients who just want to learn more about it, people who are already therapists, psychiatrists, doctors, mental health nurses, and also I get a lot of coaches and hypnotherapists who want to add these skills in. I think what you're saying there, your dad's a psychiatrist and stuff, and sending people, and I do have other psychiatrists and other mental health workers who send me a client to work with for a couple of sessions. They can then go back and then, because I think talking therapy is hugely healing and everything, but I don't think it's very good at actually tackling or changing things. But it's very good to talk about it and talk it through if it's not going to re-traumatize you and re-trigger you. But I don't do talking therapy, so that's why that I'm not qualified. I'm not a qualified counselor. So and I don't want to hear it, to be perfectly honest. So people, when I deal with really horrible stuff, they don't want to talk about it. I don't want to hear it. So IMT is perfect because we
Mm.
don't need to go into the actual details. We can actually just get the experiences. Well, I think the work that you're doing is absolutely brilliant. Helping people when with situations obviously you've been through. Is the dispatches still on? Is it online still?
Yeah, it's still on Channel 4. It's still accessible. Torn Apart. It's called Torn Apart.
So torn apart on dispatches. I'll try and put a link down below. And that's all about was it the court cases and your situation you went
Yeah,
through?
so it's about my court case and the situation and how the family courts failed me.
And how now you are going there to create change for good.
Yes.
Cool. Jules, thank you so much for your time today, and well done for all the progress that you've made and all the changes that you've made, and obviously all the relationships that are now very different to you and your family and your friends. And yeah, because that's one thing as well. I'll just end on this one. How have your friends and family, I know with your mum saying you're hugging and stuff, what changes have they noticed sort of within you as well?
What most people have said to me, and honestly, I didn't go around saying I was having IEMT. I
Mm,
didn't. Like, people didn't know to look out for a change. Not the kind of thing where you're like, guys, look out, I'm
yeah,
having.
yeah.
Like, no, I didn't mention it. So everyone's commented that I'm more. I mean, the girl that you subsequently helped, who had a very different situation, but is a close friend of mine. She came to you because she said to me, "What's going on?" It's like you're the Jules from university, not the Jules that we've had for the last however many years since this awful disaster
Mm,
crisis in your life. And I do feel more like myself, like my old self. Going through a traumatic event really changes you in so many ways. It changes your whole outlook and perspective on life, let alone the physical symptoms that I was talking
mm,
about. And I do think that's gone. I'm much more optimistic, motivated, and ambitious again. Um, I'm able to accomplish a lot more because I'm not so tired. Um, And I think my relationships with my friends, I mean, I've been, there's loads, look, the problem is I could talk about this for another hour because it's really big. I'm able to set down boundaries now. I was very unbounded. I just didn't have any inner strength or like self-esteem to, you know, so lots of things would keep happening to me because I just could not enforce boundaries. I couldn't trust it. Well, I've been doing that and that's had really positive results. You know, I'm in a relationship now. I mean, I have been seeing him for a while, but I've really kind of been keeping him very much at arm's length because I was really scared and I couldn't trust him.
Yeah.
And those feelings just aren't there. I can't access those feelings. Why would I not be able to trust him? I mean, he's a completely separate person and a lovely person. And yeah, I am a much calmer and more present mother, friend, daughter, girlfriend. I am. I'm able to focus on these things. I have the mental space and energy for these things that I didn't in the past. I think that's the difference, and that's what people notice when they say, like, you're yourself again. You're so much more available. You know, you're more fun. You're hugging differently. You know, it just seems like you're back to how you used to be. You know, because I've got lots of friends that I've known my whole life. Yeah.
Brilliant. So IEMT, come do it. It's good. Basically, that's what we're saying. It's good to do, and I think that what is important is that IEMT is part of your journey and part of other people's journeys. It's not. We don't overpromise anything. I never even offer an outcome. I can say I can see where I can help. But obviously, you know, going through these things does require different things. And the important thing is IEMT provides a space, an opportunity for you to change. So I've not told you how to change your life in any way, of how to feel or how to act or stuff, but you've used that opportunity to go and do things differently, to see different people do this work. And when you change your emotional stuff, and then when you change your technical and tangible stuff, your life is just on a different trajectory. So a massive thank you, and I'm sure there'll be loads and loads of comments. I'll put this on YouTube, I'll put it on Facebook, I'll put it out in, I don't have to do stories and stuff, but I'll do some snippets. The dispatch is torn apart, if that's correct. And that's Channel 4 is dispatches, isn't it? Yeah, dispatch is Channel 4. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day, weekend, and life. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.